in January, it was announced that Visa was not going to be going through with its plan to acquire financial services company Plaid. And that was primarily due to antitrust concerns. Not a shock. I mean, certainly it was a risk that we all acknowledged existed. It became a reality, but that didn't stop Visa's management's wheels from turning. Visa just announced they are going to now acquire a Swedish fintech startup company called Tink for $2.1 billion. I wonder, how do you feel about this deal? I mean, it doesn't seem like, given the size of the business, it doesn't seem like there would be necessarily the same antitrust concerns, particularly because I think that the debit connection that existed with Plaid, I don't think that same connection exists with Tink. But nevertheless, I mean, $2.1 billion, that's a lot of money. Does this deal make sense?
Yeah, and Tink is entirely focused on the European market, which I think will help with regulatory issues as well.
Aha.
It's definitely a replacement for Plaid in Visa's kind of strategy.
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious that it's a clear replacement. But having said that, it's a somewhat smaller company. They're paying 2.1 billion, which, I mean, Plaid's valued at something like 13 billion on the private market. But I think Visa was going to acquire for 4 or 5 billion.
That deal was something like $5.5 billion.
Yeah, so
at the time,
it's. I'd say this is about half the size of the Plaid deal. When you look at the price Visa's paying.
Yeah.
It's an all cash transaction. Tink is a player in open banking, just like Plaid was, or is, I should say.
Sure.
They essentially kind of open up consumers' banking information with their permission.
Yeah.
Usually have to check a box or something for your information to actually be out there securely. But it shares your information with all these lenders, fintechs, things like that, to kind of optimize the consumer banking experience is the goal. So lenders have access to financial information of potential customers that could help them, offer them better terms on loans than they would otherwise get.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about similar things in the U.S. market, where with Upstart is one that we've talked about a lot recently.
Yeah.
Where they look at kind of a bigger picture of a customer's financial data before making a lending decision. They don't just pull the FICO score and be done with it. So open banking can be kind of applied to situations like that as well.
Yeah.
Big potential applications here. As I mentioned, Tink is and will continue to be, for the time being, focused on the European market, but really kind of a big part of Visa's strategy to go beyond just its core business of being a payment network.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point you make in Visa trying to get past that core business. And I think that's the business that everyone is so familiar with. Is, in simplest terms, Visa is the company that owns that card that's in your wallet. MasterCard is the company that gave you that card that's in your wallet. Now, I mean, anybody that follows the payment space, that it's far more nuanced than that, and there are a number of hands in that cookie jar, so to speak. But given companies like MasterCard and Visa today, their position in the market, I mean, the conversation has been one lately of disruption. Smaller players, fintech, these types of companies disrupting companies like MasterCard and Visa and rendering them, quote unquote, obsolete. Now, I tend to think that's extremely short-sighted. I think that's a very short-sighted view. And part of the reason why I think that is because of just what we're seeing right here. We're seeing it with MasterCard. We're seeing it with Visa. They're making these little bolt-on acquisitions as they go along in order to build out that strategy and become more things to more people. And I think that what some may not think about fully is that when they make an acquisition like this, I mean, it just immediately plugs into this massive network. I mean, you look at businesses with massive networks. I mean, look at Facebook, for example, or I mean, look at Netflix. I mean, companies where even if you saw a mass exodus of users, it still, at the end of the day, isn't going to meaningfully dent the total number of people that are using those networks. And when you have that network, I mean, it gives you the ability to really do a lot of different things. I mean, I look at companies like Visa and MasterCard. To me, they seem just as relevant today And these are the types of acquisitions that should keep them relevant for the foreseeable future. But I don't know. Do you feel like these are businesses that are? Do you think they're going to be regulated out of the market or disrupted out of the market?
Yeah, I mean, Visa's biggest obstacle to growing through acquisition is regulation. We saw
Right.
that with the Plaid acquisition.
Of course.
Visa could afford to buy Square if it really wanted to.
Sure.
It couldn't get approval to do that.
I would imagine antitrust concerns would be abound there. Yeah.
So Visa has cited $185 trillion global payments market, and that includes things that they're not involved in yet, like
Right.
person-to-person payments,
Yeah.
like business-to-business transfers, things like that. So they want to kind of branch out from their core business. Regulation is an obstacle, but these businesses are acquiring become infinitely more valuable under Visa's umbrella, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
How much more valuable do you think Instagram became when Facebook took it over?
I mean,
How-
it's almost impossible to even quantify. And that was a $1 billion acquisition. And now, I mean, Facebook really is. I mean, it's Instagram for all intents and purposes.
Right, and I mean, or YouTube when Google acquired it.
Yep. Another
Or,
good
I
one.
mean, there's a bunch of examples like that where a business might have seemed like a pretty hefty price tag to pay for a startup, quote
Mhm.
unquote, but how much more valuable does it become under that? With Instagram paired with Facebook's 2 billion users or whatever,
Yeah.
it becomes Facebook.
Yeah.
It's a pretty kind of crazy concept that Visa can acquire a small company and it's instantly creating billions of dollars in value
Yeah.
because
the value of the
it's open, right. Visa's network is enormous.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
I mean,
yeah. I mean, that's
I mean, how universal is Visa acceptance in businesses in the U.S. now?
yeah. Yeah. I think
Um,
that's a very difficult thing to disrupt a powerful and widespread network.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone 3 months at a time without using cash, and one of the big reasons is companies like Visa and Mastercard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's right.
So I take that as you will, but I think it's a step toward diversification. I don't know how, especially for U.S. consumers, I don't know how significant this is going to be, just because it's a European focused business.
Right.
But it's definitely a step toward them diversifying.